Hi guys, thanks for joining me today. It's John Mercer here from Digital Parsnip. This is the first in the series of Adobe Illustrator Basics tutorials, and today is going to be the text tool. We're starting right from the beginning, and I think the text tool is a nice one to start with. So let's dive right in. Let's open Illustrator. Now you'll notice that I'm using CS5. There's no reason that you can't use any other version of Illustrator. The text tool and all of the tools we'll be using in this Adobe Illustrator Basics series are going to be available in every version of Adobe Illustrator. One of the first things that we need to do is create our artboard. Now you may very well be presented with the new document dialog already. If you aren't, click onto File, then click onto New, and we can begin to create our new document. I'm calling this document Tutorial 1. I'm taking it from the print profiles. The number of artboards is 1 and the size is A4. I'll come back in another tutorial to explain what all of this means. For the time being, just click OK. We're presented with a brand new A4 artboard and we can start work. Hopefully in these tutorials I can share with you as many keyboard shortcuts as I possibly know, and to set off with that we can start with the first one, which is the T on your keyboard, the T for Tango on your keyboard. Press that and we'll automatically enter the Type tool. You're of course welcome on the left hand side toolbar to click on the Type tool, but I find that going back and forward between the toolbar and the artboard is sometimes laborious, so I like to use the keyboard shortcuts. Once we have the Type tool selected, we can then click anywhere on our artboard and we can begin to type. Typing can be dictated by the flashing cursor, as you can see there. Once we've finished with the Type tool, what you'll notice is that we can't then immediately use keyboard shortcuts, because if we do, we end up typing further. So what we have to do is press Escape on our keyboard to get out of the Type tool, return back to the Direct Selection tool, and we can then start to work on the text, or then enter other different keyboard shortcuts if necessary. Once the text has been created, you'll notice there's a blue transform box around the text, and that transform box does exactly what it says on the tin and allows us to transform that text however we like. So I'm going to start by making the text bigger. Now we can use the 8 boxes around the transform box to stretch this text, make it larger, make it smaller to our liking. One of the things that you need to be aware of is that when we stretch it using these boxes, we'll stretch it out of proportion. To stretch it in proportion, we hold down the Shift key on our keyboard and then we can choose to stretch it. So that's how we resize text. We can do it exactly the other way. So for example, if we grab hold of the bottom and hold down the Shift, we can proportionately shrink it this way. On the left hand side we can do the same thing. Without holding Shift down, you'll notice that the left only does the left stretch, the right only the right stretch, top and bottom the same. The corners do 2-dimensional stretching, but again out of proportion if we don't hold down the Shift button. A good keyboard shortcut to note is Command and Z, or Command and Z depending where you're from, and also Command or Control depending what computer you're using. So Command and Z for Macintosh and Control and Z for PC users, and that'll take us back a few steps. It's basically the undo command. So we have our hello world. Another thing to bear in mind that the transform box does, which is not immediately apparent, is it also allows us to rotate this text. If we put our cursor very close to the top right hand transform box, we'll notice our cursor's turned into a very double-ended rotating arrow, which we can use to rotate the text. Holding our left mouse button down, we can rotate the text however we like. But again, you'll notice there isn't any uniformity to the way in which we rotate the text. If you'd like to rotate the text by 45, 90 degrees, flip it round perfectly, if we hold down the Shift button again while rotating, you'll notice we get 45 degrees, 90, 45, 90. We're able to rotate. Now, of course, every application doesn't require you to move it 45 degrees, but it is a little tip if you need to rotate in a little bit of uniformity. Okay, so our hello world. If we want to change the font of this text, what we have to do is double click on the text, which has put us back into the Type tool. We can then select the text and highlight it in the same way we would in the word processor. If we go to the top of the screen, the toolbar along the top here has some font selection drop downs and some font style and some font sizing drop down boxes. And that's another way to change the size of your font if you wanted to do that in standard 12, 14, 16 increments. So the moment I'm using Myriad Pro, one of the things to bear in mind about these font lists is they can get rather big. So again, using keyboard shortcuts, we can jump to fonts that begin with A by pressing the A key on our keyboard, fonts that begin with H by clicking on the H key. I'm going to use the font Helvetica New, which is at the bottom here, and it changes it. Also, the reason I'm using that is because it's got quite a few font styles in it, which I can show you. So they're derivatives of that particular font. So ultralight, italic, ultralight. There we are. I'm going to choose that. That's quite nice. Again, we can press Escape to exit out of the Type tool and get the blue transform box around. Last thing to note is moving text. We're able to move text very easily in Illustrator. One of the things to bear in mind, however, when we build objects on the artboard, when we've got lots of different things overlapping, it's not a good idea to hold your mouse down on the white space around that particular object. It's always best to try and grab the characters themselves to move them around, and that applies to shapes as well as text, as well as images and different bits of graphics, because we can accidentally select something else and end up moving the wrong part. So using the direct selection tool, another keyboard shortcut to remember is V for Victor on your keyboard, which automatically takes us to the direct selection tool, which is this black arrow here, and we can move that around the artboard however we like. Bear in mind with artboards, as we're moving objects around, you'll notice we have the artboard defined. Outside of the artboard is grey, inside of the artboard is white. If we move the text half out and half in, when we come to export this particular file or send it to print, we'll notice that we only get the world printed, not the hello. So anything outside the artboard is going to be cut off when we do any exporting later on. So that's the text tool. Very simple. We'll talk about putting text along paths in another tutorial, but for very simple, straightforward text, movement, resizing and changing fonts, that's it. Have fun. Thanks.